April 2015, I was 9 months into building Wiser, and I was completely ready to quit. It seemed like everything that could go wrong had went wrong. We had an investor that pulled out at the last minute. Customers were not signing up from the product. We were trying to give it away for free. And of course, the most important thing, every time I ran into my mom, and it was often because I was back at home living with her, she would make sure to remind me how much money she spent on my education and how I wasn't using it. And so at this time, I decided to start updating my resume. I was looking for jobs online, and then I got a phone call to come to Detroit for a pitch competition. By this point, I had already decided that God was giving me all of the signs to quit, that I wasn't cut out to be an entrepreneur. This was not the journey for me. So I was really, when I got the phone call to go to Detroit for this pitch competition, I didn't want to go. I had every reason not to go. I didn't have the money. I honestly wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling well. Through a series of miracles, which I actually talked about the last time I was here on this stage, I ended up in Detroit at the pitch competition. And I didn't win. And so there was like a $50,000 or $25,000 cash prize, and I didn't win. So again, I took this as a sign directly from God that I was not cut out to be an entrepreneur, and this was like the end of my journey. While I was still in Detroit, I ran into, I met, he came up to me and he was smiling, he was really friendly, and he said, "Hi, my name is Rob McDonald, and I'm one of the founders of the Brandery Accelerator in Cincinnati. And I think that Wiser would be a perfect fit. I loved your presentation." This was the first positive feedback about Wiser that I've received in the 9 months that I've been building it. But again, by this point, I decided that God had told me this was not the path for me. So I really looked at Rob and thought, this is the devil. This is like temptation. This is God testing me, like that he's using him as temptation to go down this horrible journey. And so the right thing to do is to decline. And so I said, no, thank you. The next day, he emailed me again and said, "Hey, the Brandery applications are open." And again, I was like, oh, look at the devil, keep trying. He's trying to get me. And so I declined again. The following day, he sends me another application. He's like, "Listen, I know the application's a little long. Just fill these parts out, and then I'll send it in. And I really think you're a perfect fit for the Brandery." And again, I was like, oh my gosh, like look at the devil tempting me. But then I was like, you know what? Just to appease him, because he seems really nice, I'll just send in an application because I'm sure I'm not going to get in anyways. And I continued to look for jobs online. So I sent in the application to the Brandery. A couple of weeks later, we get into the Brandery. And by this point, I was really at like rock bottom. We had no money. Wiser's bank account was down to negative $253. We actually was in danger of losing our domain name. And if you know anything about domain names, you know that's only $10. So the fact that we were about to lose wiser.com for $10 is like a big sign of where we were. But we get into the Brandery, and at this point, because we had no money, I had no idea how I was going to get to Cincinnati from California, where I was going to live in Cincinnati. And even though I didn't have anything, I still was holding on to some pride, and I didn't want to tell anybody that I was going through all of these issues. And so, I kept it in and was just praying about it. And somehow God gave me the courage to be really vulnerable. And so I called one of my really good friends, told her about the opportunity to come to the Brandery. She immediately said, "You have to go. I'll buy your plane ticket." And I didn't even really have to ask her. And so she bought the plane ticket. And then I called Rob and said, "Hey, Rob, I really want to come, but I don't have a place to live in Cincinnati, and I don't have the money to get a place to live in Cincinnati." And he said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, this is the first year that the Brandery has apartments. So you actually just come." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So now I have housing and I have a plane ticket. I get to Cincinnati and then realize that I need to eat. Man can't survive on bread and water alone, but they do need to eat at some point. And so, I wandered around. I again prayed about it. Randomly, it was the same month that CVS was launching their mobile app. And at the time, in order to get people to download the mobile app, they were offering $10 gift cards for every time you download the mobile app. So I made 4 different Google Voice numbers and downloaded the mobile app 4 times, made $40, and brought groceries at like the CVS. And I was telling someone in the Brandery about it, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, like you must be really hungry for something besides food from CVS." And so he gave me a little bit of cash, and I used that. I was able to use that for kind of everything else throughout the week. And so the Brandery starts, and on the first day, I made some friends, and I started asking people, where do people go to church here? The majority of people said Crossroads. And so I said, okay, well, my co-founders and I will come to Crossroads on Sunday. So we come to Crossroads on Sunday, and by this time, my cash in my pocket was down to $3. I mean, like literally, we had nothing else. It was the $3 in my pocket. And so I actually sat right back there, and I remember like the singing, and I really loved the worship portion of the service. And then the offering bucket came around, and a little voice in me started saying, give half of what you have. And again, I only had $3, so half of what I had would be $1.50. And so I was like, no way, God, like, having this $3, like this, even though it was only $3, it gave me a little bit of comfort to know that I at least had $3 should something go wrong, like I needed to catch the bus or something. So I was like, no, God, no way. And then, the voice just kept getting stronger and stronger, saying, give half of what you have. So again, the $1.50, I didn't have coins, so really half of what I had would become $2. So I gave the $2, and I just remember crying, and I was like, why is this happening? But I gave the $2. A couple months later, I get a term sheet. So now we're in Cincinnati for about 2 months. A couple months later, I get a term sheet for $1.5 million as a seed investment for Wiser. And after we went through the process of raising that round, it actually ended up being $2 million. So Wiser ended up raising $2 million in our seed round. And so I always think back to the moment that I sat right here and gave that $2 because God in some way multiplied it. I mean, a lot of times people will say 10 times or exponentially, but this is beyond anything that I ever dreamed of. And actually, when I came to the Brandery, I only wanted to raise $100,000, and that was really like our goal in coming to the Brandery. And so when I look back and kind of whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, there's a couple of things in my own journey, and there was a lot of little steps here. I'm not here to tell you that if you give $2 or $10, you're going to get $10 million in a couple of months, but just those things like having faith and believing that God will provide. I mean, even every step of that way, I never stopped praying. It was oftentimes that was the only thing that I could do. I really didn't have anything else, and so I never stopped praying. I always believed, and I know sometimes like the entrepreneurship journey is really dark, and even after I raised that $2 million, like there was a lot of ups and downs, and we continue to go through different processes. I never stopped believing. I always believed that God would provide. I always had hope. That's like the key thing that I think that I've learned over the past 5 years, and today Wiser's been around for over 5 years now. We're in 42 countries. We have over 2,100 customers like Kroger, P&G, Google, Facebook, PayPal. They all use Wiser in some way. And in looking back through the journey, I would always say, like, never lose hold on your hope, because hopelessness is really where entrepreneurs start going wrong, when they start believing that they can't do something and there isn't another way. Just continue to hold on to that, continue to pray, and continue to have faith. Thank you so much.